Hello, my name is Kate Round and I work for Dudley Museum Service as a tour guide and outreach worker based here at the Red House Glasscone. In this vlog, I'd like to tell you about the art and design in glassware and introduce you to some of the 20th century designers, both in-house and commissioned, who made sure that Stuart Crystal products were both desirable and at the forefront of fashion. The elements of good design are functional, practical, ergonomic, aesthetically pleasing and affordable, and good designers lead fashion, making objects that are both desirable and collectible. In glassware, the product design is constrained by the manufacturing process. While the materials used in making glass are relatively inexpensive, the labour costs increase with the handling stages and the time taken to produce each item. There are two stages in design and manufacture: the hot shaping of the glass and the application of the cold decoration. With lead crystal tableware, the shapes are hand-blown, and addition to the shape, such as handles, stems and feet, or applying hot glass trails, all increase the handling costs. The cold decoration includes the marking of the design on the glass and either cutting, enamelling, gilding, etching. The costs increase with the complexity. For good glassware design to be practical, the designer needs to understand the manufacturing process and to keep in mind its simplicity and desirability. Let's look at the history of making glass and how it influenced today's design, before we meet some of Stuart Crystal designers and their innovative products. Early glass was discovered in Assyria and Egypt as glass beads dating from 2,500 years BC. Egyptian glass vessels date from 1500 BC. They were made by forming the molten glass around a mould of clay, allowing it to cool and hollow out. Small and highly prized vessels like the alabastron of Sargon II, found in Assyria and held in the British Museum. This alabastron is a small vase and would have held precious liquids, inks, oils, perfume. Glassmakers of the early Roman Empire experimented with colour. Beads of colourful glass were extended into canes or rods and bundled and sliced through to make mosaics of millefiori. These would then be mould-pressed into vessels, sometimes with decorative threads and hot glass trails added. The Romans also discovered the innovative revolutionary technique of blowing a gather of glass to inflate it into a mould. But by far the Roman most famous achievement was cameo, the art of layered hot glass, which was then cut back into designs in relief, usually a light-coloured glass over a dark background. As the Roman Empire declined, cameo glass was a lost art form until revived in Stourbridge with the reproduction of the Portland vase in 1876. The 3rd and 4th century saw the innovation in the cutting of glass to decorate cold finished pieces, with intricate cage-cut designs on vessels. There were no power tools then. Adding hot trails of glass developed into claw beakers, found in northern Europe in the Rhine area in around 500 AD. Forest glassmakers made these drinking vessels, and the green and yellow hue of the glass was due to impurities of either copper or iron in the sand. The raised claws were not just decorative, but they also helped grip the conical beaker. In Egypt, in the post-Roman era, glassmakers were using patterned tongues to stamp a design on hot glass. They also produced molar tooth vessels, named due to their shape. The 3 stems on the base increased their stability, preventing spillage of prized contents. In Egypt, vessels were lustre painted, coated with a paint pigment containing silver and reduced in a low oxygen smoky atmosphere, a technique that wasn't understood. In the 7th century in Islam, vessels were made with hot glass trails added, then, when annealed, painted with silver and copper pigments imitating pottery techniques, and lustre fired. This was a complex 3-stage process. The Byzantium Empire of Constantinople, now Istanbul, pioneered cutting glass in and assembling it to form distinctive decorative tessellated mosaics, still influencing glassmakers today. Colourful ornamental fish of core-made glass with combed colourful decoration, made in Egypt since 1000 years BC. This one is in the British Museum, and here we have an example of the equivalent modern collectible blown glass fish. Glass has been made in Venice since the 7th century, and in 1291 the furnaces were moved to Murano to reduce fire risk in the city. It was from the 15th to the 19th century that the famous Facon-de-Venise and the beautiful clear Venetian crystallo was made, influencing the glassmaking world, such as this 16th century Venetian goblet, beautiful green glass, enamelled and gilded, and this late 16th century mould-blown latticino lobed drinking vessel with an intricate gauze-like cable and thread design. German glassmakers influenced functional cylindrical beer glasses with added hot trails and prunts, the rummer wine glass with a coiled stem and a clear bowl, and decorated with trails and prunts. These lent themselves to cold engraving decorations, with gem cutters employed as engravers and calligraphers for elaborate inscriptions. Bohemian glass of the 17th century was a heavy crystal clear potash and lime glass, which allowed deep cuts developing from the deep engraving. Their landscape allowed the harnessing of the power of mountain springs to drive the cutting wheels. In England in 1675, George Ravenscroft developed lead crystal. The addition of lead increased the working time for the molten glass. Metal holds heat. The glass could be worked for longer, leading to more elaborate shapes. Lead crystal transformed glass decoration. It's heavier and softer than soda glass, lending itself to deep, faceted cutting with a brilliant rainbow shine that rivaled Venetian crystallo. Hence, simple functional shapes became designed, elaborate, and collectible. In the 17th and 18th centuries, bubbles of air trapped in the knops of the stems developed into beautiful collectible air twist stem glassware. The glass tax, introduced in 1745, meant glass was taxed by weight. Glassware became finer, and addition of decorative effects such as the air twist stem reduced the weight, keeping it affordable. Cold decoration was influenced by the Jacobite movement. Enamelling on white opaque glassware, popularised by 18th century Delftware, for example the Bohea tea caddies, named after the cheaper black Bohea tea imported from China. Enamelling on clear glass was a speciality of Bealby's of Newcastle upon Tyne during the 1760s, and usually featured enamels of ruins, trophies, coats of arms and rural pastimes. Gilding was also used extensively to decorate glassware, usually in simple designs of vines and grapes. By the 1760s, English glassmakers were migrating to Ireland, unaffected by the glass tax, and that allowed more lavish designs. Thicker, heavier glassware afforded deep diamond cuts, increasing the prismatic effects, eventually losing most of the surface area and reducing the effect to what was termed as prickly monstrosities. Glass tax was removed in 1845, leading to an escalation in design, using colours, layers, enamelling, and a surge in the Venetian influence for elaborate Victorian tableware and centrepieces. The 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition gave testament to the skills, dexterity and extent of the imagination of the designers, produced by English glassmakers and exemplified by Follett Osler's crystal fountain here in the centre aisle. At the turn of the 20th century, design became important to industry, And whereas product design used to be in-house, glass manufacturers started to realise the importance of a marketing structure and commissioned designers to enhance their product ranges. One of the first designers for Stuart Crystal was Jules Barbe. He concentrated on colourful enamels and gilts. Brochures were produced to advertise their extensive ranges of glassware. Each design comprised over 80 pieces, with in excess of 50 designs in production. One of the most enduring designs was Beaconsfield. Started in 1907, it was still produced until the 1980s. In 1910, at the start of the 20th century, Robert Stuart, with the assistance of his two leading glassmakers, Alan Stanier, Will Husselby, developed a distinctive hot-trailed Art Nouveau peacock range of vases and bowls sold in Liberties of London. The greatest designer employed by Stuart's was Ludwig Nye. He began his career as an engraver and became their principal designer from 1918 until his death in 1937. This is his clear glass vase with an unpolished cut design of rain clouds, birds and waves done in 1935, and a bucket-shaped vase cut all over with outline leaf shapes of horizontal bands. Between the wars, Stuart's needed to expand their market by introducing a basic bread and butter range. These moulded ring designs, called Stratford, became the foundation of the enamelware designed by Ludwig Nye from 1928. Ringed items had greater stability during the second firing. Ladies worked on the enamelling. The outline design was applied by acid transfer from a copper plate engraving, and the colour filled in using a camel hair brush. Geoffrey Stuart also introduced V-shaped cocktail glasses, and in 1933 the novelty cocktail set was launched, featuring a red devil holding a goblet on the shaker and in different poses on the accompanying glassware. Other designs included snakes, spiders, lucky symbols and harlequin. In 1934, Stuart's invited Paul Nash, Graham-Sutherland and Laura Knight to design glassware for an exhibition in Harrods. Paul Nash's rain decanter and wine glasses were made by master glassmaker Bonnie Nicklin, who worked for Stuart's for almost 70 years. Graham-Sutherland designed a large clear-cut crystal bowl, radially cut with repeated arched frosted mitres. One of his editions sold at auction recently for £760. Dame Laura Knight was the most prolific of the artist designers. She worked with glassmakers and understood the process. She experimented with colour and enamelling. Her most famous designs were circus, clowns and modern bacchanal. Reg Pierce was principal designer from 1937 until the start of World War II. He designed a vase decorated with wavy lines and seagulls. Gulls were a popular decorative effect in the 1930s due to the record-breaking gull wing glider. After the Second World War, in October 1948, John-Luxton was appointed as chief designer at Stuart's. Trained at Stourbridge School of Art and at the Royal College of Art, he worked with Geoffrey and Derek Stuart. The 1954 catalogue was the first that reflected his design policy of simplicity with minimal decoration. His 1950s contemporary style table service Rhythm was introduced, and here the Mariner's plate in 1965 was made in a limited edition of 50. There were other commissioned designers, but in the 1960s, cut crystal tableware was less fashionable, with increasing emphasis on minimalism and Scandinavian designs. Since the 1870s, the sales and marketing for Stuart's was done by Stonier and Company of Liverpool. The company was owned by Stuart's and they handled sales not just in the UK, but worldwide. Stuart Crystal remained a legendary name in the changing marketplace until the brand was sold to Waterford Wedgwood in 2001, and the cone became the wonderful visitor attraction that we see today. That was a whistle-stop tour through the history of design. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.